Doing oil and water pump for a Ferrari FF. Like, to do this job, these are the tools that you absolutely have to have. Um, I cannot. You really should have a full set of every kind of tool because this job is very difficult. But these are jobs that you absolutely have to have. You're going to need a long extension with a swivel 17, and this is to get 3 of the motor mount bolts out. Then you're going to need a 17 with this type of very low profile but yet extended head, and that's for the 4th motor mount bolt. It is sunk in and the exhaust is very close to it. This is the only way I was able to get that out, and I have a ton of other tools, and this is the only one you can get to work. You're going to need a small 13, and that's going to be for locking some of these studs for the oil pipe coming out of the block, the oil exit that returns to the oil reservoir. You're gonna need snips, obviously for some zip ties and possibly some hose clamps, a good pair of pliers. This right here is a 10 mil dog bone. This is the only way to get the proper torque on the top bolts of the oil pump because you cannot get a socket on there. The way that you use this is you attach this to a wrench, and then you can apply torque to it. Now this is a great way to get it off, but if you're applying the torque with a torque wrench, this has to be at a 90 degree to your wrench when you are using it to get your final torque. The reason for that is if it's longer, then you're extending the arm from the pivot point, and that makes it a higher torque than what's going to read. And if it's shorter, then you're providing less torque when it beeps. So it needs to be right at 90, and it can move around as you're getting to the tightness, but when you get to that final torque, it better be at a 90. The problem is the front oil pump bolt. This is the top here. The bolts, this one right here, closest to the front of the car. The motor mount will be here. You have to put the motor mount and the pump in at the same time, so you cannot get to that. So you're gonna end up having to go like this, and that will extend the torque. So what I would do is get one of the other ones torqued, then set this like this and feel what feeling that feels like, and then go and try to copy it with the front one. And remember, this is very controversial. Some Ferrari enthusiasts are going to be like, dude, you fucking aren't doing it right. But a good pro can very closely match as long as you've got the same length from the other bolts, okay? The other thing is this for those top bolts, I cut one of these. This was a curved Duralast wrench. And the reason I cut this off is when you loosen those bolts, you're still only able to get something like this in there. It was a wrench like this. I just cut the end off and then polished it a little bit so it wouldn't be sharp. And then you could just put your thumb on the end and you can pop it off the bolt, spin it around, pop it back on, spin it back, because it's very easy to turn the bolt. It's just that these 10 mil bolts are so deep set in here that you cannot get a socket on that, and you cannot get a wrench on that, and it's really the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And it's super long, and that's going to be extremely hard on this forward bolt because of, again, the motor mount. So what you're going to do is once it gets to back down to about here, as you can see, that's not enough room for any wrench to come off, but it still has a thread left in there, and your fingers cannot get on either side. It's extremely difficult. So what you do is you put this little tool in there, like this, and then you're able to like lay it flat, spin it up around the bolt, pop it back onto the bolt, and then turn it again. This is very crucial to do a 12 point like this so it can bite it. This is not what you're going to be using for final torque. This is just to manipulate it when it's loose. Very difficult. You're going to need the 16 for the subframe bolts. This is a 19 for the the transmission mount, or what would be the transmission mount, is actually the torque tube mount. Obviously, mid-length, and I use mid-length and 10. I think this is a 15 or a 16 and 19. Those are kind of repetitive for the other bolts. Then you're going to need an Allen and an 8 mil. You're going to need, or you don't have to have these, but it's going to make it so much faster to get bolts loose, is the ball head 5 and 6 mil Allens. Just be careful you don't round these out. Again, it's going to be very difficult if you round out bolts. They're hard to get it easy out on an extractor on. Some extensions, you really should have a ton of these extensions. These are the ones that I've used. Again, an 8 mil for some of the clamps that hold wires. This is a 13. This is just another 5, just for like getting that final torque down. 1/4 inch ratchet, some extensions for that. Obviously an adapter from 1/4 to 3/8 for, some things. But anyway, these are the tools that you're going to need. And then also torque wrenches. This is going to be great for your subframe, which can go up to, I believe, like 60 Newton meters. But the thing is that this won't fit in there when you're trying to torque those bolts at the top of the oil pump. So this thing is clutch. It's small, fits in a great little tiny area. And again, you're going to have to use, if you can get, Snap-on does have a 1/4 inch dog bone tool like I was showing you earlier, but you may have to use an adapter from 1/4 to 3/8, and then a dog bone. That's how I did it, and that adapter does not lose any torque as long as, again, the dog bone is at a 90 degree to the head when you do the final torquing. Again, here's what we got. This one is just leaking coolant everywhere. It's going to be common for anything over 10 years old. So here's the oil pump, multiple ones stacked there, and then the coolant pump up there. Okay, the first thing you're going to do after you get the bottom panels off, which you can figure out, I mean, if you can't figure them out, then you shouldn't be doing this job. You're going to go ahead and remove this subframe. So you're going to need a jack stand. What I did is I used one of those like screw jacks right there under this portion with like adequate, padding between so it doesn't damage, scratch it. And then one under this portion of the motor here. And then just lightly screwed those up, raised them up, and then just like literally just taking the pressure off the plate. And then this 19 mil number 6 Allen bolts, and then 16s all the way down. And then these are, I think, number 7 Allens. Pull those, and then the whole thing will drop. I'm gonna take this pipe down here. Again, 5 millimeter Allens around it. I believe 10 Newton meters. This is from the heat shield to also 10 Newton meters, and then there'll be this bolt, which I think is 25 Newton meters, and then this joint, which I think is 85 Newton meters. And then make sure you use a backing wrench on this when loosening this. You do not want to just crank this, or you may damage, flex, or break this. You're gonna take these 3 10 mil. Let me put the flash on here. These 3 10 mils right there around that pipe. There's one on the top, and then you can see on the left and right, and heat shield. And there's a little washer, a little very thin washer behind them. 10 mils, and those are 20 Newton meters when you put them back. There we go. Take the wheel off, and then a T30 there, and then a pull tab thing there, and then carefully put this up like this, and then you can get in here, and you're gonna have a bracket there that holds this pipe on the other side. That bracket goes down, as well as that bolt right next to it, and then also a bolt on this side that I removed. See it over there? Tink. Tink. There we go. And then that will allow you to remove that pipe here, there, to get it to come loose, because as you can see, it does have an O-ring in there. So what I do is I use a little bit of a belt. I think it's still up there actually. Where did it go? Right here. And then I put it up here on the top right there, And then I use a pry bar. You can see the mark right here where I was. Come on, baby. Focus on me. There we go. Right here where I was prying. So put the pry bar into there, pry, and then pry up from the top. Let's see if we can do that for you. Okay, so like, you get the idea. Up here, and you want to go as high as you can, and not pry hard. Just gently wiggle back and forth with the belt in between the pipe, because we're not replacing that pipe. And wiggle, wiggle, wiggle until it comes free, and then it'll come up. And again, keep your oil catch can here for all these tubes coming out, because they're all prone to leaking quite a bit of oil. Next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna remove the 3 screws that hold on that water pipe there. There's 1, 2, and then the third at the bottom. There's also one that holds the wires on, but I see. The next thing is you gotta take the motor mount loose, and to get access to the bolts, there's this mount that is around the bottom of the motor mount, and it's like this on the mount. So this bolt you can get from just right up here, and then this one here you're gonna get, you can see the little bracket there poking out. There's also a little clip on the side of it that has this is an 8 mil that holds a wire there. So you're gonna to this, and this is the bolt that holds it on with the washer. So you're gonna need to take that off. Then you can get to the bolts, the 17 millimeter bolts that are the motor mount bolts. So you're gonna reach them with like a very long extension, and you can see the missing bolt there, and then the bottom and the left bottom, and then the top right one, you can, the top one or the inside ones or back ones you can reach from here. This top one though, it's so tight that to get that top bolt right there, it's a 17. You're gonna need this gear wrench right here, 85917, or just get the whole set, and it has like a socket, a fitting like this. To work on that is 45 Newton meters. The next thing you have to do is remove those 3 studs by like putting 2 nuts, you know, locking them back to back on each other and twisting them out. You're gonna take the top bolts out on the top by hand, and this one you're gonna have a difficult time because you're just gonna have it resting on your hand the whole time. You do have a bolt right there on the front of the oil and water pump, and that is a 9 millimeter Allen. Excuse me, a 6 millimeter Allen, and then the bolts on the top. This that bolt, and the other bolts on the top are a 10 mil, and it's very difficult to get these out. You're gonna need a little wishbone donut like this, and you're only gonna be able to make small turns. This is the only way you're gonna be able to torque it back. Also, once you have all the bottom bolts out, you know, all the way across here and up here, then you can like stick a pry bar right in there and just gently wiggle this pump back. Now just be careful that you're going to have oil starting to come down, and then again, if you're prying hard, something's still bolted, so just be careful on that. Alright, so once you take the pump off, it's a good idea to go ahead and take these screens out, and then, like, as you can see, there is massive amounts of debris that just get sucked up. So this is the suction area of the pump, where the pump is sucking out the oil, and obviously this is like silicone where when they assembled the motor got pinched off in the engine. That does, you know, contribute to problems with the oil pump or the engine. More of it all just splattering everywhere. Okay guys, so when you do this job, we've got it all cleaned up already. You may wonder why I have some plugs here. Well, I've just been pulling them out. Something I want you to notice is that this outlet for the water, the direction of the flow of the water is to go up and then make a curve, and it flows this way out of a pump that's spinning that way. And I want you to see here that the direction of it here is going around this way, you know, back up here, and this one is just straight up there, and this one is kind of back to the right, and this one is back to the left. Now you notice there's a bevel on the edge there, except for where? Except for right here. See how there's just a sharp edge, and over here there's a bevel? Look at this one. Bevel, sharp edge. It's going the direction of the flow. It's going direction of the flow, like completely out there. Again here. See the bevel? The flow goes through here and up and rubs right here and right here as it goes around that corner. That's where the water is like, whoa, being held in to the curve. And the same thing happens here. The pump comes up here and shoots it there and down, and it will sharpen this top edge, and you'll lose the bevel. And that's what we saw a second ago, and that's what caused these to rip as you're placing them in there. So what you need to do is you need to take a 220 grit little piece of paper right here, sandpaper, very easy. This metal is very soft. That's why it's able to be polished so smoothly from that flow. You just need to sand just like this, just wherever you see that sharp edge. And the amount of sanding needed is very small. You just like this, just like this. Now these are not oil supplies. This oil all collects and goes straight out there. So to rinse this out, I'm actually just going to spray in here and bathe all this out, make sure that we're clean and clear. And there's a screen right here I've left in that I can pull and bathe out. We're talking about a very small amount of metal here. And again, this all going back to the reservoir where before it goes into the engine will be pumped. This one not so much. So we're gonna go ahead and put something up in there really quick before we do this. Okay, so the last thing you're gonna need to do is, as it's up inside of the car, you're gonna have to reach, you have to slide, the motor mount's trying to hang out here. You're gonna need to slide it back, reach your hand up in here, and gently press on this seal as it slides into the block. Otherwise it will catch and still cut it no matter how much you polish. Alright, the way that it has to go in is because of this lip right here and the shell of this pump, it has to come from above it to go in. So the first thing you're going to do is kind of line up the seals, go above and forward. And again, you're going to have this pipe here that wants to be in the way. Okay, great. Now we're past that point, so we just kind of rotate it into the, there we go. Okay, now we've done a lot of movement at this point, so we need to just check to make sure that all the seals remain in their seats and flush. I can see all of these here. Let's see, we've got the mirror here. I mean, this is a really crucial part of the step, because if these get pinched, you might not know it, and ideally you'd want to stop before, as soon as you can. So I have one that looks like it's a little bit out, so I'm going to go ahead and just touch it, make sure it's in all the way. Again, it has that grease in there that should help it. And you're not really looking at the face of the seal, you're looking at the side of it, the profile. You want to see if it's poking up above where it should be, not really if it's sitting in the round. Okay. Yep, we're looking good. Okay, now that we have that in, the motor mount has to go in before you can bolt the pump up. So water pump seals in there also. So in order to fit that in, now we have to angle it down and back. So it's going to angle back away and down like this, and then the motor mount can fit in between the exhaust and the top of the pump. This is there we go. Okay, great. Now, once again, we're going to go back up level to where we need to be. The pump now is going to hold the motor mount up, and we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to check and make sure that everything, we don't see any protruding seals. Everything needs to be. You've got to assist this thing forward into the gear, which it may not want to do at first. So you can grab a pair of pliers like this that have been locked so they're not going to mar anything, and you're going to carefully grab the splines and you're going to turn it until, while applying pressure from the gear. And as long as you put a little bit of lubricant on there, you should feel it pop into place. Alright, really quickly, I just want to say this tutorial is more or less to show you what's involved with doing it. Now, if you follow all the steps, you will have done it properly, and I'm trying to ensure that if you genuinely want to do your own work, you can do it. But you need to have the tools, like I'm not even going to list exactly what tools you need, but you need to have a plethora of sizes, of depths, of, like I said, that wishbone. When you're using that wishbone to apply torque to those top bolts, you need to have a small torque wrench that easily fits in that space, and you need to make sure that that dog bone is at 90 degrees to the handle of the torque wrench. If it goes a little bit of an angle higher or lower than 90 degrees from the handle of the torque wrench, you will be applying more or less torque than what's indicated. So this is a very technical job, very difficult job, but you can do it. But this is more or less to show you what's involved. The torque on the water pump bolts, all of them are 25 Newton meters. There is a sequence in which you should tighten them. The same with the subframe. When reinstalling it, there are, little spacers you'll see that go underneath the motor mounts. You got to make sure those are properly back in there. And then the torque of the motor mounts and the subframe, I believe it's 40 and 60 Newton meters off the top of my head. But regardless, you should, if you do want to do this yourself, you should buy the repair manual. The one for the Ferrari FF is easily available online. Just Google Ferrari FF workshop manual, and in there it will give you can download a PDF with all the torque values and operating procedures. Now, having said that, just because Ferrari says you need to do it does not mean you need to do it. Ferrari manual does leave out that there's a cloth heat shield around the motor mount, and it also tells you that you need to remove the catalytic converter on the passenger side, which I did not do. So again, you don't need to do that. As far as the seals go, I'm going to put those in the description. You need to replace all the seals that you encounter in this process, and I'm going to put those part numbers there for you, and be very careful. Even some of the ones from the factory had been pinched and were smashed, and so it's very difficult to get them all on there right. But again, if you really are determined to do it and do it properly, you can do it. If not, you're always welcome to bring the car by the shop, and I'll be happy to swap it for you.